Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, whenever the fuck you're tuning in. This is a revitalized and refreshed episode of the Rosinbaggers podcast. We've got the draft in the books, we've got All Star Weekend in the books, we've had our little break, and we're back to it tomorrow with the de facto second half of the season starting out on Friday. Ty, how you doing, bud?
I'm doing well. I'm missing baseball. I'm missing baseball games. I'm missing regular season action, meaningful competition. The first half of the regular season wrapped up on Sunday, and for whatever reason, even though it's only 4 days out of the year, when there's absolutely no other sports that are going on other than summer league for the NBA, it seems like an eternity until baseball gets back up and going again. So excited to get the regular season underway, excited to get the second half of the season underway, excited to see what happens in a few key races. In particular, the American League East got extremely hot coming into Sunday. Baltimore is lockstep with Tampa Bay. You got the NL Central with Cincy and Milwaukee playing a 3-game set. That could ultimately determine who comes out on top in that particular division. And then there's so many other storylines, plus the draft. We had a huge, exciting week of baseball without any games. It's wild. It's bizarre, and I can't wait to talk about it.
Yeah, buddy. On that subject, let's start out talking about the draft. Hey, Dad. Um, we had some history, huh, bud?
History for one Division One school. History for one town 20 miles to the south of me. We'll get into that in just a little bit. But let's start with the LSU Tigers. And we knew there was the possibility of a 1-2 scenario. First college team ever to go with a 1 and 2 player in the draft. Big Paulie goes to Pittsburgh. And I know that you're stoked to talk about the number 2 pick with Dylan Cruz, who I felt should have been the number 1 pick, but I'm going to give you the floor. He went to your Nationals. The floor is yours, Gary.
Yeah, man, I have, kind of made it my thing to shit all over the Nats, to be honest. Um, and the number 2 pick is somebody I agree with you that I thought, should have probably been the number 1 pick. He just seemed like the most kind of can't miss guy. I get the idea of Skeens and, you know, what he brings to the table, the big imposing figure on the mound. But man, Dylan Cruz is just electrifying. Um, you mentioned it. I don't know that it was hyperbole. Honestly, some people may think that potentially you were kind of stretching a little bit, but 400 does seem like we might be flirting with that with a guy like Dylan Cruz because he's so professional with every at bat. As a college player, he's so mature. His command of the strike zone is unbelievable. And oh, by the way, he's one of the best defensive players in the country. He's going to be one of the best defensive outfielders in baseball immediately. His speed is deceptive. He kind of gets a knock for not being the fastest, right, center fielder. But I can tell you, as somebody who watched him play quite a bit this season and last season, he covers a lot of fucking ground in the outfield. And just ask the catchers on other SEC teams exactly how often they wanted to see him on fucking first base because they didn't. I can tell you right now they didn't want to see him on first base. So he may not get the flashy 99 speed rating like an Ellie De La Cruz when it comes to MLB The Show, but Dylan Cruz is nearly a 5-tool guy. I don't know that he's got major league power where you're going to see him hit 40 bombs, but he's a guy that's going to go gap to gap. He's a guy that's going to create issues on the base pass for the other team. And he's a guy that's going to give you plus fielding and plus arm in the outfield. Home run pick by the Nats. I thought they did a really, really good job behind that, too. Getting a guy out of Miami in Yoandy Morales, who was sneaky. I thought he should have been a first-round pick. Don't know how he slipped to the second round. The Nats addressed a lot of needs that they had. Young guy, high school pitcher out of Texas who could potentially be a guy who's going to, turn into something. That's the hope with these high school guys. But I thought the sneaky best pick of the draft for the Nats, because while Dylan Cruz, I thought was the best player in this draft, the sneaky best pick that the Nats had was Andrew Pinckney out of Alabama. I know that I raved about him to you and Stove in the chat during the SEC tournament and during the regionals of the College World Series. He is, I don't know how he slid all the way to the fourth round. Maybe it's age, maybe it's the fact that he played at Alabama and not at
Right.
pedigree schools or whatever it might be. He wasn't a highly touted guy necessarily coming out of high school either. But he's a guy that can fucking lose the ball really quickly on you at home plate. He tanked 3, I think it was, during the SEC tournament off really good pitching, including the guy who went number 1 overall. He tanked him twice this year.
Mm-hmm.
Faced him twice, tanked him twice. And he's a guy in the outfield, laser arm, a lot of assists this year, covers a lot of ground, plays a strong right field. I think the Nats outfield, if we don't start trading the talent away, is in really good hands for the future, because James Wood right now is
Yeah.
lighting up minor league pitching and is probably going to be in the major leagues next year, along with a guy that maybe Dylan Cruz is going to be in the major leagues next year, because I think he's ready. And Pinckney, I think, is a guy who could be fast tracked as well, because I just look at his tool set, and I think that he's a guy that could be up there, and we may have all 3 outfield spots figured out here in one draft plus trade from last season. I, I've really shit on the Nats. I've shit on the front office. I've shit on the ownership group because we're never willing to spend any money on anybody. But I have to give it to Rizzo and company. We hit a fucking home run in the 2023 draft.
There's only one team, Major League Baseball franchise, that I gave an A to. Everybody in my draft grades got B's or even lower, in terms of the positions that they needed to fill, in terms of the voids that they had on the diamond, in terms of the players that they got. The one team that got an A in my book was Washington, and I think it's mainly because Washington did such a good job of identifying the gaps that they have on their major league roster and identifying who could be major league ready as of the day after the draft. And I felt that they got at least at minimum 3 of those guys, and I was really impressed with what you guys did. And now the question is for Washington, because I know you're in that particular market, and I know you're in sort of a Kansas City, Pittsburgh, Detroit style scenario where if you can get these guys in a low term contract slash mid to halfway decent long deal, and they blossom and they bloom, you guys could make a run at this. But I'm curious to see, because we talked a little bit about it with Dylan Cruz a couple weeks ago on the show after the College World Series, where I had made a mention that I think he's a day one starter. And you said, well, he's got to get adjusted to the major league level. How do you treat these collegiate draft picks at least your top 4 rounds? Because I think your top 4 rounds were all extremely great. How do you treat that in the farm system to get them ready to go and at the major league level?
Yeah, it's interesting too, because I think a lot of that depends on where you are as a team as well,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, do you want to bring someone up who's not necessarily ready, but you've got a team around him who can kind of mentor and bring him along? That's not what the Nats have right now, right? So I think they do have to be a bit kind of careful, right? I think some teams like the Nats, and you mentioned some of the other smaller market teams, you've got to be careful when you're bringing prospects up, because they bring value, but they also bring the potential of sprouting into building a World Series team, as we saw the Nats do, right? With all of the first round draft picks that they got with Harper and Strasburg, et cetera, and Zimmerman and all them on down the line, eventually budding that into a World Series title. That's the end game, right? So
Right.
you got to find that happy balance. Is it getting them more at bats in the minor leagues? Maybe it is, right? Maybe it's just a reps thing. For a guy like Cruz, I don't think that that's necessarily the thing, right? I think he's a guy that you look at and you say, I need him in the major leagues as quickly as possible. One, because he's 21, I believe. Two, because I think he's major league ready. And three, because I look at what he was for that LSU team, and I look at him as a young guy who could be a leader in the clubhouse.
Absolutely.
I also forgot to mention in the 5th round, they got his buddy, Gavin Dugas from LSU as well. So, and I think Gavin Dugas can be a guy that can play multiple positions. And Amy asks, do you think an infielder is versatile? There are a lot that are, right? You look at guys like Tatis, and I think Acuna could play the infield if he wanted to. I know he played as a younger guy. But you're looking at some of these guys that can be infield, outfield. I think a guy like Gavin Dugas could be, potentially for us, a guy that can play multiple positions. Those sorts of things are important for a roster too. But I think the chemistry with Cruz and Dugas as well is a pretty important thing for rookies.
LSU had 9 starters on the field, if you will. They drafted 13 players. That tells you how great LSU was. And again, and I will say this, that was a once in a generational baseball squad in terms of how the stars aligned for that.
Yeah.
One more note I want to touch on the draft was something that's near and dear to our heart. Speaking of once in a generation, we had a once in a generational athlete come through the city of Hastings, which is 20 miles to the south. And when you look at Nebraska baseball as a whole from a state perspective, you can maybe name Bob Gibson from Omaha. You'll throw in Alex Gordon from Lincoln and what he was able to do with his long storied stretch for the Kansas City Royals. Other than that, there's not more than a handful of guys that have made it at the major league levels. Whitey Richardson from right here in Grand Island. But where I grew up and born and raised and played on the same fields he did, it is so heartwarming to see a guy get drafted, not only get drafted, but get drafted as the highest pick the city has ever had. Their previous was I think maybe in the 19th round. Mike Bovey from the University of Omaha, who, by the way, set basically every batting record for the Mavericks at this glorious complex at the University of Omaha, goes 2nd round, 54th pick to the Milwaukee Brewers. And a short story on the Boveys. His father was the coach of the Legion programs here in the city of Hastings. He also ran baseball camps for the youth in the summer to get them acclimated to what we needed to start doing to prepare to get to the Legion level. At 7 years old, I attended one of those camps, and at the time, and we've often talked about this, there was 2 channels. You had TBS for the Atlanta Braves, you had WGN for the Chicago Cubs, and I had taken allegiance to the Atlanta Braves basically because it was the only team that was on. And I donned a Braves cap, and right before I got in to the camp, my dad said, and took the cap off me, replaced it with a Cardinals cap, and he goes, "You're going to thank me later." Day one, Jim Bovey, who was a Cardinals fan, said, "You are the camp MVP." And since then, I have had a glorious love for St. Louis baseball. And he gave me that love for the Cardinals. And it's funny how that all comes full circle to seeing his son, who, by the way, if you go picture in picture, is a splitting image of his father at the plate with those determined eyes that I used to see in the dugout all the time, to him trying to go inside out on a splitter on the outside corner of the plate. It's the same look. It's the same feel. It looks like the same guy. And Mike Bovey was one of those guys where when we were playing at the high school level, towards the collegiate level, he's a 4-year-old kid who's taking BP with us. And by the way, was making more contact than I was. I knew he was going to be special. And it was a special moment. 2nd round draft pick for Milwaukee. And even though he's a Brewer, I can't help but don some Milwaukee blue if he decides that's how he wants to go. Now, maybe he could go to the transfer portal, and that's certainly available if he decides to do so. And I'm telling you this, if he does, watch out for the name Mike Bovey next year in college baseball, because he's a 2nd round pick already and could do even more damage if that's what he decides to do so. But at 2nd round, I don't know, man. That's a really hard thing to go back and say,
pass up.
I'm gonna try and improve my draft stock nah, man. If I get to the show on a 17th round pick, I'm going through the minor league system. But congratulations to the Bovey family. They are certainly deserved of the honor and the praise they have done. The reason Hastings baseball is in existence and is as strong as it is because of the Bovey family, and they deserve nothing but the respect and gratitude, and a little tip of the cap to Mike for his draft selection.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Those stories are always so good. Yeah, Amy is asking what happens with LSU next year. Ooh,
Transfer. I mean, the transfer portal
yeah,
changes the game, right?
it does.
We could have said this. Well, the cover is empty, and they're going to rebuild, and they're going to be rough. But the transfer portal has absolutely
Yeah,
across the board,
yep.
football, baseball, basketball, any sport, it changes the game, and you can build back a program in one off season
You
with
can go get a
recruiting.
Paul Skeens from Air Force.
Yeah, and clearly they know how to work the transfer portal
Oh
because
yeah,
they worked it pretty damn well
oh yeah,
this last season. So I'm actually not concerned about LSU and what they're losing.
yeah. I think we're gonna see them dip into the transfer portal quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we're just coming off of the All-Star break. Today's the last day of no baseball, and we're back at it tomorrow. Excited about that. But let's talk about some of the festivities. The NL wins a pitchers duel, 3-2.
The NL wins.
Yeah,
That's
first
news in
time
and of
in
itself.
yeah,
2012.
yeah. It's crazy. It's crazy. A decade of futility, and they finally get off the schneid. Um, Josiah Gray, I've got to give a little bit of a shout out for Josiah Gray again. The Nats, right? I'm praising the Nats. I know this is going to ruin the rest of the season for me, but Josiah Gray with a 1-2-3 inning in the All-Star game. It looks like, fingers crossed, right? That trade of James Wood and the Josiah Gray move and last year's trades, they were miserable. Last year and the year before, the two trades, they were miserable times to lose superstars. But fingers crossed, hopefully things are kind of turning the corner. Um, Shout out to the NL for holding on. Low scoring affair. Shout out to my degeneracy. I took the over and missed miserably. It was only 7.5, and I still missed miserably. So don't tail my bets. If anything, make sure you fade me if I'm posting bets online anywhere. But what are your thoughts about the All Star game before we talk about the home run derby?
Honestly, with the All Star game, I wanted to highlight more a little bit about James Wood. I wanted to talk more about your your Nationals because you, you go back to the Futures game prior to the All Star game festivities. You had talked about him, and 2 weeks ago on the show was honestly, I don't follow the Nats farm system. Woe is me. You had brought him up, and I was like, okay. And then I saw him in the Futures game, and I'm like, all right, I'll see. Oh damn! Like
Another Nats fan in the crowd.
he looks good. James Wood was great
Yeah.
in the Futures game. The All Star game itself, just having the National League win, was a great little feather in the cap. I want to go back though to back when it meant something, back when it had some stakes behind it, back when there was home field advantage attached, because it misses a little bit for me in terms of the watchability because the stakes just aren't as high.
Yeah, it is. You know, I don't know how they change it either. I know like the whole World Series home field, the money's too good, so like the paycheck for the All-Star game doesn't entice them anymore. It's the same thing with the Pro Bowl in the NFL. You get that bonus check, it just doesn't mean anything. I I don't know how we fix it though, right? That's for me. Do I want home field decided on the All-Star game? I had my mixed feelings about that. Um, if I'm a 105 win American League team and I'm playing a 90 win National League team in the World Series, I don't know that I want my fate to depend on guys that aren't even playing in the World Series, right? That are in the All Star game because every team gets some representation. It's a how do we make these All Star and Pro Bowl games matter? I think you just make it fun and entertaining, kind of the way the NBA has sort of embraced the games. they're just dunking and shooting from all over the place. The NHL has tried to change up their format a lot. I just don't know with the game of baseball how much you can change it to make a single game in a vacuum feel different and feel special like it used to. Um, because we just don't get moments that we used to get at the All-Star game, right? And I know during the build up to the All-Star game, the last couple of days, Sunday, Monday before the All-Star game was played, there was a lot of talk about, the Cal Ripken moment with Alex Rodriguez, the Randy Johnson and John Kruk moment. Like, we don't necessarily get those moments like we used to because I just don't know that the All-Star game means as much to these guys. They go, they have fun. It's in a, they want it to be in these desirable locations or these fun baseball cities.
Mm-hmm.
And it's cool. I think the home run derby could be, right, the highlight of the All-Star weekend. It could be if and we'll talk about it in a little bit, right?
Oof, boy.
But
Mm-hmm.
you see the guys interacting during the home run derby, and that's what I mean, right? The spirit of the home run derby, the spirit of what they're doing, the shit talking and that sort of stuff, having fun, dapping each other up, high fives, and yada yada. I think some of that is what baseball needs to capture for this, and how we do that with the game. I just don't know. I just don't know.
I'll give you one flight thought here, one flyer, just to consider and to ponder and mull over. And I'm going to go to the soccer pitch or football pitch, if you will. When there's a break in competition in the Premiership, in Major League Soccer, in the Bundesliga, in Serie A, in Italia, they go to international competition.
Mm-hmm.
The World Baseball Classic was an absolute hit.
Yep.
What if you have a little round robin invitational international classic for your All-Star game that shows the love of the game, that gets not just USA All-Stars, Puerto Rican All-Stars, Dominican Republican All-Stars on the field where they are already going to be. But can you imagine Puerto Rico and Dominican Republic versus the rest of the MLB All-Stars? Taking the best of Canada, Great Britain, Mexico, USA, and throwing them up against Japan, throwing them up against Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico, who are already going to have a prime nine of All-Stars anyway.
Yeah.
Can you imagine an international flavor being added to Major League Baseball to make All-Star Week a little bit better?
The NHL used to have something similar to that, right? It was us versus the world kind of thing, and
it was fun.
I think you could do that, right? Maybe you make 4 teams, right, and you make it a 3-game kind of playoff for the All-Star break. Maybe the All-Star break has to extend, and maybe the regular season finally has to shorten, right? Maybe we go to 145 games, right? They've been clamoring for that for years, right?
And there's some news on it too. Yeah, there's some news
right?
that they're
maybe
considering.
Here's your excuse to maybe shorten it, extend the All-Star break, give everybody some extended rest, and shorten the season also in the same fell swoop, because maybe you do Tuesday, it's a semifinals, there's 4 teams, maybe it's America, and then there's the Caribbean, and then there's like Asia, and then there's the rest of the world, right? The international team, whatever. 4 teams play, 2 winners play for the first place game, and then the 2 losers play for the third place game. I don't know. I like that idea though. I like that idea. Something after the home run derby and some of those festivities, maybe you go and you play a 3 or 4 game kind of tournament for a first and second and third and fourth place finisher, and you break it up that way. I like that idea. World Baseball Classic was a huge hit.
I think the American versus National League meaningless game means, because it's meaningless, means nothing to the fans.
Yeah,
I truly believe that. Your dad even likes it, so like it's on board. It's
right,
3-0. It's approved. Let's do it next year. Rob Manfred, listen to this pod.
Yep, for sure. My dad's asking if the Nats can get by the Mets. The Mets have been playing bad baseball.
They're not good.
But the Nats have gone through some weird kind of peaks and valleys. You win 6 out of 7, and then you lose 17 out of 19. So I don't know if they're going to be able to sustain enough winning baseball down the stretch to catch the Mets. I do think that this is your last place finisher in the NL East. I don't know that they're, don't believe anymore that they're the worst team in the National League. I think the Rockies probably do finish last in the NL. But I think the Nats are still, they're a basement team in the NL East. But I don't think the Mets are going to run away and hide from them because they're not a good baseball team right now.
I don't think the Mets will finish last because I think the Mets will spend enough cash at the trade deadline to not finish last. Even if they have to spend cash to finish fourth, like the New York mentality, the big city mentality is, well, we can't finish last. We're at least spending cash to get over Washington. But it's been a horrid season, and maybe the best headline that I read was Katie Wu. She's a sports writer for St. Louis. She writes for The Athletic. She's fantastically talented. But her headline was "The Boys of Bummer," and it dealt with the Padres, the Cardinals, and the Mets specifically, who were all supposed to maybe challenge the Braves in the National League, and have all been basement dwellers in their respective divisions, apart from San Diego, who still has the luxury of having Colorado to stay ahead of. Colorado is miserable. They have no pitching. Their offense is fun when they click, as we see against Anaheim, but rough. No, check that. There was the way around. Anaheim blew them out. But anyways, C.J. Cron, Elias Diaz, the guys can mash up there in thin air, but their pitching is horrible.
Awful. I am excited, though, to see exactly what call-ups we're going to get. And selfishly, I'm looking at Washington, who are we going to see the retreads? Are we going to see Cutter Kieboom playing Major League Baseball again? I hope not. I hope we get some, some of these guys. I don't think they're going to call Wood up this year, but I'm curious to see some of these call-ups, because the other thing that makes the call-ups interesting to me is that we don't have the same sort of hold mentality that we used to with prospects in the major leagues. So now we're going to see farm systems and who they're producing, right? Because these teams have said our studs in our farm systems are going to be in the major leagues and they're going to play. Your Rutschmans, your Rodriguez, et cetera, your Ellie, your O'Neill, those guys, they're up to start the season and they're staying up. Now with these August, September call-ups, we're going to start to see who teams have really invested in their farm systems and who's going to get those crucial games down the stretch and who they really feel good about going forward from their farm systems.
I think Wood could make the roster when they expand in the latter part of August. I don't think Washington is going to be in a position this season, because you look back at Adley and you look back at Julio, and both teams were sending a message to the rest of that locker room that they were ready to go push for this. And in both scenarios last year, it worked out tremendously in their favor. Washington's not in that particular scenario, but when your roster expands to 40 on September 1st, there's no reason not to give him some major league ABs and to at least get him semi-acclimated. There's going to be zero chance of loss of self-confidence, because you're not going to be playing meaningful baseball at that point for Washington. But I could see him easily. September 1st, give him a call-up, give him some shots in the big league club.
Yeah, potentially. I think there's, potentially a pitcher or two that we might see come out of the minor leagues for the Nats. But, I look at some of these fringe kind of playoff teams, right? Is it Miami? Are they going to dig into their minor league system potentially and bring a guy up that could be an impact player, right? Who's another team that I think is kind of on the brink in the AL Central, right? Is there somebody in the AL Central that could be an impact guy here in August, September?
Is there anybody in the American League Central farm system? I don't know. It's a division that's so bad that I felt like if there was a player in the farm system, they would have got the call at this point. And they haven't.
Yeah.
So I'm seriously wondering, how bare is the cupboard in the most embarrassing division in baseball, which is the American League Central?
Yeah, for sure. One thing I did want to point out before I'm going to pull up Amy's comment here too.
Sure.
It's interesting to me. So we've talked a lot about Ellie. We've talked about O'Neill, and I know when O'Neill was first called up, put on the roster to stay up. He's tall, right? He's 6'7". Ellie De La Cruz is 6'5". I don't know if you caught it watching the Futures game, but James Wood is 6'7" as well. So it's interesting because historically, right, baseball's not been a tall man's game at the positions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Position players, a lot of pitchers, big, tall, country strong, corn fed guys, but we're starting to see a wave of taller, super athletic guys that normally might go play basketball, but we're kind of seeing them play baseball now. It's just an interesting thing. I don't know if there's a whole lot to dig into analytically, but it's just an interesting thing to see because historically speaking, outfielders weren't 6'7", right?
Right.
Tall guys like Torrey Hunter were kind of far and few between, and he wasn't 6'7" either. So it's interesting to kind of just keep an eye on that, I think. Especially shortstop, right? With O'Neal and Ellie. Like shortstop is certainly not a position you put tall guys at either.
Baseball's better than basketball, so it makes a lot of sense. If you got the choice between the two, you can either hit 450-foot shots and have 40,000 people in a split second give you a huge pop, or you can get a golf clap for making a 3-pointer. I'm going to be taking and you got to deal with flopping in basketball. You got to deal with referee issues. The only thing you got to worry about here is CB Buckner and Angel getting the strike zone wrong. I mean, it's a better game. So come play. Come play.
Come play. Amy said she got the tickets. We were talking, I believe that was Dodgers Padres we were talking about going to with the kids. So yeah, for sure. Rivalry game. I think it's going to be a tremendous experience for sure. And I think if I remember right, she said it would be her kid's first game. So
and that's Chavez Ravine, I think, right? She's going to the LA under the
she is
bright
going
lights.
to LA, I believe that's what we were talking about.
Although Petco Park at night is on my bucket list of places to go.
It's fantastic. I was stationed in San Diego for a year and a half when I was in the Navy, and I caught a couple day games, but I did catch one night game, and it's fun. It's fun, really interesting atmosphere. The atmosphere around the stadium's pretty cool. The way they kind of, put on a little bit of light show outside the stadium, but yeah, it's a pretty neat experience there. It's not a bad ballpark, man.
You'd have to sit on the Western Iron Supply Company backdrop. You'd have to sit in those seats, right? Like it'd be like Fenway. You don't go to Fenway and don't sit on the Green Monster. You don't go to Petco and not sit by the Western Iron Metal Supply Company.
Oh, so it's in San Diego.
It's in San Diego.
Okay. That's cool.
It's at Petco. Even better. Hope it's a night game for you. Send pics.
Yeah, my dad was out there, so that was pretty cool. I think we actually caught a World Baseball Classic game when my dad and I went. My brother and I caught a couple of Padres games. I don't remember who was playing when my dad and I went, but it was a WBC game. Really cool ballpark. They've got a nice little like beach seating area too, where like behind the fence there's a little like sand area where like kids can play. And
okay, cool.
Sparing number of seats and stuff. So pretty neat ballpark, man. For as much flack as the city of San Diego gets with pro sports and support for pro sports, that stadium's pretty cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was world. Yep. So I think actually Korea was playing someone. I don't remember who. They might have been the US possibly, but that was a really cool experience to be there for a WBC game. All right, let's shift gears and let's start talking about getting back to regular season baseball, bud.
Do you want to talk dingers first? Home run derby?
Oh Jesus, I did skip.
No.
The moment that I paused because I thought we had one more thing to talk about.
I saw the pressing the brakes a little bit, and you're like, I guess we're just gonna slam on the gas. No, home run derby, the last part of, well, it was actually the leadoff part of the All-Star Weekend, but it's going to be the last thing we talk about because I think we're both on the same page, which is weird because I thought we would have a different direction on this because thus far we have all been in favor of the changes to the game of baseball. Thus far, they've all worked out really, really well until it came to the watchability of the home run derby. And maybe I was naive to it in the last couple of seasons, but this year I noticed the shit out of it. This year it was awful. This year, I don't know if it was because ESPN was trying to implement and talk exit velos and barrel ratios and all of the shit with the StatCast era that we've already kind of harped on that we don't like because it's taking the kids' attention away from what's most important about being in that box. But B, because I really don't give a damn, and then C, the way it is now, you got 4 minutes on the clock, and the goal is to hit as many in that time that you have out of the ballpark. So it is a consistent revolving. If you remember the old Bugs Bunny cartoon where they were just revolving and swinging the bat and crushing the ball and revolving and swinging the bat, you know what I miss most about the home run derby, other than Chris Berman going back, 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 is actually admiring the
A
talent,
moonshot.
admiring the shots, watching them leave the park,
Yeah.
seeing how far they go, watching Griffey Jr. in 1997 hit the brick wall on Camden Yards because they focused on it, because they could, because you had 10 outs to work with and it didn't matter about the pace. That was so much more enjoyable from a fan perspective. And listen, I told you this in the group chat, man. If I want to watch a guy take 10,000 hacks in 4 minutes, send me to the fucking forest and I'll go watch a lumberjack. It was not enjoyable to me whatsoever because they didn't focus on any single hit that was hit at the home run derby. They stayed on a box cam. They had another side angle cam showing StatCast and showing the ball trajectory, but they didn't actually follow it.
Yeah.
It was lazy and it was a poor production. And then on top of that, a kid got beamed. You know, Vladimir Guerrero was hitting 20 balls a second, and they're trying to follow like 5 balls. Kid gets drilled in the face. Like, it's dangerous. It's dangerous for the kids. It's not fun to watch for the fans. Give me my 10 outs back. I want the old home run derby. And it really, in the grand scheme of all of the rule changes that have happened in Major League Baseball, the only one I'm really bitching about to get off my lawn as an old time traditionalist is the home run derby. I want my 10 outs back. I want to admire the shots, and I want to be able to watch and enjoy the derby and not just have it on fast forward on like a YouTube summary of what happened. Give me my
Yeah,
10
for
outs back.
sure. I'm gonna double down. This it's gotten out of control. So the early change to this was it's timed, but you got to wait till the ball lands to throw the next pitch.
And I'm okay with that. If you
I'm
go back
okay
to
with
that,
that
you go back
because
to
from
that,
a
I'm okay.
safety perspective too, right? The ball's down, you can go on to the next pitch. You mentioned it, kid get in the face. You're tracking a bunch of balls. Guys are hitting fucking 20 of them a minute. It's absurd. The pace is so stupid. You can't follow anything. The commentators can't follow shit. The count's never right. Like I forget who it was that finished in the count was like 23, but then by the time the next batter, Rosarena, comes up, whoever hit before him in the semis, I cannot remember who it was, but uh Rosarena comes up and suddenly there's fucking 26 or 25 on the board. And I'm like, what in the fuck? What are we doing? This is stupid. It's stupid. They made a lot of good changes to the game, but how we've progressively gotten worse with the home run derby, I don't understand it. I just don't understand it because this isn't baseball, right? For all those people that said, oh, the pitch clock is going to make baseball no longer baseball, you can get off my lawn with that because I've always been of the mindset get on the fucking bump and throw the ball, get in the fucking box and hit the ball.
Let's go.
This is stupid. It's just stupid, and I hope for fucking God's sake that fucking Manfred and company are paying attention to how awful that production was, how unentertaining it was, with one exception when Julio Rodriguez hit fucking 40.
Whew.
God, did he get hot. But other than that, it's not entertaining anymore, man. It's just not, because you're not seeing the ball leave the park. You're not seeing the track of the ball. Guys are just hacking up there and hitting line drives all over because they can't concentrate on hitting us. They're just swinging. They're just swinging and hoping it goes out of the park. I don't like it. I hope they change it. I hope they're paying attention. We need to get back to the 10 outs because you mentioned a couple of things that we wouldn't even probably have seen if this thing existed back when Griffey hit, right? And when Mark McGwire was hitting fucking shots that went into orbit, right? But Josh Hamilton, how about the spectacle that he put on in Yankee Stadium, hitting balls out of the fucking park that we wouldn't even have seen because the camera had to pan back and forth so goddamn quickly because they couldn't miss out on the batter swinging the bat, right? Because that's the action we're here for. It's terrible. It's low production quality. It has hurt the home run derby. Amy mentioned earlier, like the guy who won the dunk contest was a joke. The dunk contest has become a joke, and I'm telling you right now, Major League Baseball, if you don't stop, the home run derby is going to become a joke, despite the incredible static picture moment that we got from the winner.
Absolutely.
Because the ultimate father son picture of Vlad and Vlad Jr. with the hats off and tipping the cap, and then we got to see Vlad Jr. raise the same trophy that Dad raised in the home run derby. That was a redeeming moment in an otherwise awful home run derby.
And the other moment I'll go back to and I'll flash is still with your winner, Vlad Jr. As David Ortiz took the Gatorade towel and brushed him off, you flash back to at least 16 years earlier, and little Vlad Jr. took a Gatorade towel to David Ortiz and fanned him off to try to cool him down a little bit because he was trying to get his dad to win the Derby. The other thing that I'll make a mention of, and I almost blew through it, from the I'm taking 4,000 hacks in 4 minutes, the injury factor. Yep. Luis Robert pulled something. Hopefully, it's not going to be extended time off for him because they've got a pretty big series coming up this weekend that I'm going to talk a little bit about here. Yeah, from that perspective, when you're changing your swing to that style, and I mean that would throw me off at the high school level, let alone the major league level. There's just a lot wrong with this, and it's not baseball. It not in any way whatsoever. And again, from the fans' perspective, how can you sit there and enjoy that when you're not enjoying the majesty of what makes the home run great in the first place? And that's how far the fucking thing goes.
Right. Herculean feats hitting the ball 450, 500 feet. The other, you mentioned the injury piece. Lubob got hurt, but I thought Randy got hurt.
Right.
Before he got his bonus time. And I'm surprised in the finals he actually swung with his bonus time, because it looked like to me that he was babying that left hand after his regulation time in the finals. So it's a risk, and maybe that is the thing that opens baseball's eyes to say, maybe we're doing this thing wrong. All right. Onward and upward to more positive things. Let's talk about second half of baseball, man. I know we're past the halfway point with games, right? I think any baseball fan knows that. But de facto, we're headed toward the second half of the season. All-Star breaks over. Trade deadlines looming around the corner. A little farther than in, kind of years past. But we get a little more time for teams to evaluate whether or not they're going to trade Shohei Ohtani, right, or other players. But we want to start highlighting series again, man. We're getting back into baseball here after the All-Star break. What series do you want to talk about?
I'm gonna be going with the Braves, front runner in my opinion in the National League to hoist the National League pennant, going up against a very continuously disappointing team in the American League Central. High hopes for the Chicago White Sox in terms of they didn't lose anybody. They gained some pieces, but they haven't gained any ground on anybody in the American League Central. And to me, it's sort of shit or get off the pot weekend in Chicago. Right now, one of the big rumors is Lucas Giolito. Right now, one of the big rumors is the Dodgers are going to be coming calling here pretty soon. And that's a extremely strong rotation that I thought could have put it all together and been lights out and possibly a 90-plus game winner in the AL Central, despite some of the offensive question marks. The rotation's been bad, and now they're going up against the Braves, who 1 through 9 have arguably the best lineup in baseball. And
you ain't getting any days off against the Braves.
And somebody challenged me on that. I'm excited to see this, not only because I want to see how the Braves pick up where they left off, and can they step on the gas right out of the gate here in the second half of the season and start to put distance on not only the rest of the National League East, but the rest of the National League in general. Try to take over that top spot, make home field go through Truist Park over there in Atlanta. God, is it the 612? I do so good at area codes until I get to Atlanta. Any hoodles, you got to go through Atlanta. I think if you're going to want to pick up that pennant at the end of the season, I'm excited to see this. And Saturday, or excuse me, the Friday matchup should be prime. Miles Kopech, who's a name that I've always been waiting to really turn that corner for Chicago. Hasn't really developed into that guy that I think can turn the corner, but I love believing in these young pitchers, man. A Mackenzie Gore, a Miles Kopech, or Michael Kopech, excuse me. Got Casey Mize from Detroit. If you can ever get his arm healthy from Tommy John's, Tristan McKenzie's another one that's just been kind of on the shelf with the health injury issues. Watched some damn good pitchers a few years ago coming up through the minor league system, and I'm waiting to see them hit that corner. Well, you got Kopech. He's going to be going up against Charlie Morton. Charlie Morton, of course, one of not only a great guy on the mound and has had tremendous success for Atlanta, but he's also just a great clubhouse guy. I haven't met one person that said a bad word about Charlie Morton in his entire career, whether that be with the Houston Astros when he won a World Series or with the Atlanta Braves when he won a World Series. So Friday's pitching matchup should be primetime baseball. Saturday could be rough for Chicago. You're going up against Spencer Strider, the stash man. Love me some Spencer Strider. Right now, one of my choices, if you gave me 3 names to throw in the NL Cy Young race, Spencer Strider would be in that category. Certainly is one of the front runners. I probably got him towards the top, to be honest with you. And then, Sunday you wind down. There is no Lucas Giolito going for Chicago this weekend. I believe Lance Lynn is the Saturday pitcher for the White Sox, but it's an opportunity, I think, Sunday to pick up a win because Atlanta's kind of throwing a spot starter in there. An opportunity for maybe Chicago to pick up 2 or 3. We'll see on this Kopech versus Charlie Morton matchup. Now, for my fantasy sakes, I've got both Charlie Dog and I've got Spencer Strider. So I'm looking for Atlanta to pick up at least 2 or 3 to keep my newly named fantasy team, by the way. I was the Rosinbaggers to start off the year. I've changed my name. I found a great one at a celebrity softball tournament. Sons of Pitches is
I like it.
Is the new fantasy baseball team name.
I like it.
So we've rebranded. We're getting set for the second half of the season because we're kind of like where Washington's at right now, toward the bottom of the barrel. Need to pick things up a little bit in that department. I think Atlanta takes 2 of 3, and I think they start off the second half of the season strong. But I want to see if anybody in the American League Central, anybody at all. Hello, Marco Polo. 5 teams.
We need that meme with the stick figure holding the stick and poking.
Do something.
Do something.
I'm gonna retract my previous statement. I said 5 teams have a shot to win that division. The Kansas City Royals are out. They're done. They put an X by their name. They're not going to the postseason because they're not winning the division. 4 teams have an opportunity to win that division. I want to see one of them get out of the gates hot here to start off the second half. It could be the White Sox if they were playing anybody but the Braves. I think Atlanta wins this 2 out of 3, but I'm excited for it.
Yeah, speaking of that, little trivia for you. The Braves have won 11 straight series, and they swept, I believe, 4 of those 11 series. Who was the last team to win a series against the Braves?
Oh, man. Last team to win a series. Was it the Washington Nationals?
I guessed the Nationals. So my buddy asked me, my buddy, the Braves fan, asked me this the other day.
Okay.
And I remember the Nats taking game 1 of a series against the Braves, but then they lost games 2 and 3.
Okay.
It's even worse than the Nats, though.
No.
The Athletics are the last team to win a series against the Braves. They took 2 out of 3 back in. Oop, I had it up just a moment.
Was that back when they were on their winning streak?
That was part of their 7-game win streak. Yep. That was in May, at the end of May. Yep. And since then, the Braves have not lost a series, including sweeping, I believe it was 4 of those 11 series. So
listen, if you lose 2 of 3 to Oakland / Vegas, you get your ass in gear. You're like, dude,
yeah, right?
We're awful. We need to figure this shit out tomorrow. If you lose to Oakland, and they did, and they haven't looked back since. Atlanta's they're something else, man. They're
fish grease right now.
They're going to be special. And for all the Braves fans watching out there, and I know that there's several, including your pops. It's a special team. I talked earlier about once in a generational LSU, once in a generational athlete. This is a once in a generational potential for a mid-90s franchise that we saw with Atlanta because of the work that they did a year ago, because they locked everybody up, because they spent money, got long-term contracts for these big-time stars. This could be the very beginnings of
A dynastic run.
of a dynastic run. Well
Yep.
said. That's a great word, dynastic. I like that.
Absolutely. All right, so I'm gonna switch to a divisional matchup here, and for very different reasons than you highlighted there, the Braves and the White Sox there. I've got Astros, I've got Angels coming out the gate, Ohtani going game one of the series, and for me, this really could be the shit or get off the pot series for the Angels. And I know that there is still the factor of Artie Moreno might just say we're not trading Ohtani no matter what. But for me, if you're a team that is considering the possibility of moving that mega superstar in Shohei Ohtani, if you come out of the gates and stumble against a divisional opponent, and their schedule doesn't lighten up either after playing the Astros, but this was their first series coming out of the All-Star break. This stretch here could be the determining factor on whether or not you move off of Ohtani, because Houston's in the wild card race with you. You've scuffled into the All-Star break. You're not healthy. Rendon is nicked up, Trout's nicked up, and you're not getting Trout back till probably the end of August, maybe middle of August if you're lucky. This is a crucial stretch, and for a guy who leads his team in every major category already, they're probably going to need Shohei to be even more of his best against the Astros, who have been playing much better baseball, going into the All-Star break. I am not optimistic that that's going to happen, and I think the reason I really am looking at this series is I think this is where we're going to start to hear the rumbling start to pick up that the Angels are taking phone calls on Ohtani. I know the whole Artie Moreno X factor, but if you are the Los Angeles Angels, separate of the ownership factor and not wanting to be the guy that kind of sent Ohtani out the door, from a baseball, from a foundation building, from a farm system reloading perspective, and just out of, I don't want to say respect for the player, but like just understanding that you're not getting any better even with him. It's time to move on and get the biggest haul you're probably ever going to see in baseball back. You're probably going to see a team empty 5, 6, 7, 8 of their top prospects for Shohei, because that's the price he carries. And you're looking at teams like the Dodgers, who have a full cupboard, and the Yankees potentially have a pretty decent farm system as well. You're looking at those teams and saying, give me what you got. If I'm the Angels and we scuffle out of the gates here, it's time to start taking those phone calls and say, all right, I'm going to reload my entire farm system with one trade, and this is going to be the trade. And I'm hoping that I identify the right guys out of your farm system to make my farm system better, so that eventually I can win some fucking ball games.
If I'm the Angels, and I'm going to throw a completely different scenario at you because I'm a total dick when it comes to being a GM in baseball.
Sure.
I'm holding the queen on the chessboard right now, and I damn well know it. I don't want 8 or 9 of your best prospects. I want 4 or 5 of your guys that can help me win ball games and put some distance on the rest of the American League West right fucking now. Yeah. And they have that opportunity. And I think that's one of the things that we're missing when we talk about the American League West and when we talk about the Angels in the race and the Shohei deals, because everybody automatically assumes, based on history and trade deals, that you're just dumping a farm system into a program. Shohei is the best player of all time already, and we can say that. And we can say that with confidence. And not only does he produce on the field, he produces with this little thing called revenue in terms of sales and butts in the seat and jersey sales and merchandise. Shohei brings with you an opportunity uh, to be the richest franchise in all of baseball if you really cash in on it.
Mm-hmm.
So the Angels hold that queen on the chessboard, and they can go out and take starters, position players, pitchers off of rosters and say, "You want Shohei? We want to win now.
Yeah.
We want our guys. You keep your farm system, and you can place all those guys around Shohei, and that'll be great for you. But give me my boys and give me my boys now." I'm not saying it's a St. Louis situation, but St. Louis is going to be a seller in the trade deadline. But St. Louis doesn't have the cash flow. I think you're looking at one of two destinations. You're looking at LA or New York. I don't know if New York's ready to win it all this year. I can see New York giving Anaheim their starting core for Shohei, Shohei landing in the Bronx, New York building around Shohei, and Anaheim catapulting in the American League West because New York gave him the starting players because New York can pay him. There's two franchises that I think can pay Shohei what he's going to ultimately be worth, which is probably going to be upwards towards $1 billion contract, which is insane and unheard of, but that's what he wants, and that's what his agent wants for him. I see him going to the Bronx, but I don't see it for prospects. And I think that we got to get out of this idea of it's just going to be a dump truck full of prospects and start thinking it's going to be a monumental shift that catapults Anaheim this season.
Yeah, I mean look, that's a great perspective for sure. I just look at, historically, it's been these farm system moves, but I had this conversation with my brother the other day about the potential for a Shohei trade, and he said sort of the same thing you did, but in a different way. He said, if I'm Anaheim, like I've botched my farm system for fucking a decade. I don't want prospects because I don't know how to handle them, right?
No
I
shit,
mean,
right?
you look at Joe Adell, right? He's been the next guy for what, 5, 6 years now, and he's
Yeah.
never become that guy. And you look back, on down the line with the Angels and some of their prospects, they just haven't been able to. Whatever they're doing in their minor league system isn't working.
Mm-hmm.
Trout was a guy who was fast tracked to the majors because he's fucking Mike Trout.
Right.
But other than that, what are your wins in that farm system over the last 25 years? You've got to go back to like Gloss and some of these other guys that were developed in house. And I don't know, who is it in the last 25 years? Mike Trout and everybody else.
I think you get a call a minor win with Chone Figgins, and I think that you get a minor win based on a no hitter thrown from rookie Reed Detmers. And other than that, I can't name you one good Angel.
Right. Oi. Anyway, let's bring this thing home, man. What do you got for me? Closing thoughts here as we get into the de facto second half of the season.
Man, closing thoughts. I just go back to the amount of 3-day depression, if you will, that you go through without Major League Baseball and without the grind of the 162 game season and flipping on at night and always knowing that there's a baseball game that you can catch on. I'm so excited to get back in action. And every year during the All-Star break, it always feels like it gets just a tad bit longer without Major League Baseball. Baseball is life for me. It consumes my nightly activities. I love it. It's always on, at least in the background. It's excited to get things going. But what I really want to highlight is you brought up your Nationals at the beginning of the program to give them praise. I'll bring up my Cardinals to say that clock is ticking, and it's ticking very fast here in St. Louis. It's not a good situation with the front office as a whole. It's a situation where they're going to be looking at potentially doing some trades and giving away some big names. And Nolan had a good quote. He was asked if he was worried about getting traded. And he goes, "Look, it's a business, right?" I've gone through franchises that have traded their top players, or at least not if it's not their top players, it's my favorite players. Danny Amendola for the St. Louis Rams back before the St. Louis Rams became the LA Rams. Several others can come to mind. But if Nolan Arenado goes, after everything that we did to bring him in and the great deal that we had and bring him onto a program that we thought was going to be a winner, It's going to be devastating for a fan base. I want them to think very carefully as a front office on how they approach this upcoming trade deadline and how they move forward. Because right now, when you look across the board at moves that St. Louis has made, it's been swings and misses. It's been shipping off Randy Rosarena because you thought Dylan Carlson was going to be the next best thing. It was giving Sandy Alcantara to the Miami Marlins. It was letting Adolis Garcia go to the Texas Rangers. And you watch all of these guys have success. You've swung and missed on every offseason move and every midseason move that I can think of that you have made. Your clock is ticking, not only from the dugout perspective as the skipper. I've given a lot of shit to Ollie right now. I'm starting to go higher up the ladder into that front office, and I'm starting to think that the program might be internal. And you might have bought yourself a week of saving grace because Randy Arozarena didn't win the home run derby. And had Randy won it as a former Cardinal who we could have had on our squad, the screams and the temperature would have turned up just that little bit more in St. Louis. It's already boiling hot, and it's going to not take very long till they go from the frying pan to the fire.
Yep. This is that time of year, man. It really is. It could be your favorite player. I've seen a lot of mine because I have an affinity for small market teams. I've seen a lot of my favorite players get traded. I've seen a lot of my favorite players walk in the offseason and go on to win World Series elsewhere. It's tough. It's tough. But from one fan to another, there's still baseball to be played.